Okay, hi again, everyone. Once again, it's Emma here at Function Point. Thanks so much for joining in our session today with the title of Can I Write Off a Martini Lunch? Hopefully, everyone can see the screen I'm sharing. I'm just going to go through a couple of slides and then we'll hand things over to Jeremy. So today, can I write off a martini lunch? This is all going to be about expenses. Jeremy will be doing today's presentation. I will be here as co-pilot. As co-pilot, I'll be happily answering your questions that you can type in to the GoToWebinar control panel. So feel free to type them in there. I'll either answer them in writing, and some of them we may even be able to get Jeremy to answer live for us. Today's session, a bit about that. We're going to be talking about managing your business expenses and keeping track of your staff expenditures, chargebacks, and accounts payable. So what I'm going to do now, Jeremy, hopefully you're there with me.
I am right beside you, yes.
Fantastic. I am going to make you the presenter, and then you can start sharing your screen with everyone and take us through what you had planned today. So just hang tight while
Okay.
I do some magic here with GoToWebinar. Okay. So I've made you presenter, and then you should be able to share your screen with us when you're ready.
Yes.
And Jeremy, I'm hoping, I know you've got a few things that you're planning to go through, but I'm hoping that as usual today, you'll be able to just check in with us and see if anything's sort of pressing that's come up as you're presenting as you go through.
I definitely will, for
Oh,
sure.
wonderful. You're always so good at that. Oh, wonderful. So I see your screen. You're just sharing your, looks like your classic dashboard view of your system there.
Correct, yes. It is my dashboard that I like to have set up so I can see the jobs and the tasks and dues and the timesheets all at the same time. So the
Fantastic.
first thing I want to cover as far as expenses are the old-fashioned vendor expenses. Now, what I've done in the system, I've already created the job and the company and the vendor. So what I'm going to do is actually just go through setting up the vendor, setting up the actual expense against that job, and then showing you the printouts for that expense. And then we'll follow by how we do expenses for on-site training or anything where you have to go visit a client. And then followed by how we enter supply expenditures or against a Visa or American Express. So let's start right away here with creating the actual vendor themselves. You'll notice everything to deal with customers and vendors are located under the companies. They're the one and the same. The only difference is the actual company type. So in this case, I'm just going to create one called image source. If I can type here, it would be image source. All right, my keyboard is acting a little funny, so bear with me a moment here.
Oh no, this is like last time we had a webinar together when my keyboard and mouse died. Maybe it's something to do with, maybe it's our team matching up here.
All right, so let's try this again. The luxuries of Wi-Fi. All right, so there we are, image source, spelled correctly and everything. All right, so we're going to actually change the company type here to supplier, or in this case, we can also use vendor. They both work on expenses, but in this case, we're going to actually use a supplier because the supplier is actually going to be performing work for us and supplying us with prints in this case. So we're going to pick supplier. Now, the industry type is a mandatory field. You'll notice there's a few yellow labeled fields on this screen. Those are the mandatory fields that you need to fill in for the information to save correctly. So if we want to take a look here, we've got a few different options in my test system. For this one, I'm just going to click on printer and publication. Let's just add LTD on here to make it a little bit different than the one I currently have set up. And we're going to hit submit, and we should have a save action any moment. There we go. All right, so for this job, we're going to just go to jobs, view jobs, and we're going to find the one where I nicknamed vendor expense job, just so we could easily find it while we were doing the webinar series here. So the job I'm looking at is 30312. And from there, you're going to notice that we've got a few items here. We've got a little design and production. That's the in-house work that the staff's actually going to be performing and putting their timesheets against. Then we actually have printing, and that's where we're going to be going to an outside vendor to get the printing done once the production is done. So we've got two options. We can either go to expenses, external, add expense, and create an expense this way, and filling in the supplier, the job related, the service group, and the expense type. Well, I want to show you this little neat feature that we've got, and that is adding the expense from the actual estimate page or the job financials page. Now, just to kind of put in like a little secret side here, for this to work, you do have to put the external expense on the estimate beforehand. You can come here and actually click on the plus to add the external expense from service, and again, that only works if you've estimated the expense. If this line does not exist on the job financials page, you will not be able to click the add here. But the interesting thing that I find is when you click it add here, it fills in everything already for you, and all you have to do then is pick the supplier that you want that expense against. And I'm just going to pause before we go further and see if there's any questions at this point.
Hey, Jeremy, thanks for checking in. Hopefully you can hear me okay. Haven't had any questions yet, but everyone do be encouraged to type your questions into the GoToWebinar panel. And also, I realized I failed to mention at the beginning how long we're probably going to go for today. Jeremy, correct me if I'm wrong. We'll probably go for about a half hour and maybe more if we get lots of questions in. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's fair. I would say, yeah, half an hour, maybe 40 minutes, 45 minutes if we've got questions.
Okay,
So yeah, that would definitely
perfect.
be that length.
All right.
So
Well,
what I'll
thanks for
do,
checking in. Sorry, I'm over talking you, but thanks for checking in. And yeah, everyone just be encouraged to type your questions in.
all right, so I'll just move forward here with finishing off the vendor expense. So in this case, the vendor I'm going to put in, I'm just going to type in image, and you'll notice I'll pull up to, I'm just going to type in image and hit tab, and what that will bring up is a filtered search of anyone that has an image in their name. And you'll see that I've already had one image source and then image source LTD. Image source was when I was practicing beforehand, and image source LTD is when I just created with the webinar. So you can go ahead and click on the actual supplier to bring that through. I do want to kind of touch base on the fields you see on the expense. There's been a few support tickets coming in about what needs to be filled in for certain printouts to work and for the financial information to go to the job page. So what I want to kind of just go through is a quick overview. The reference number is the vendor invoice number. That is required to go into QuickBooks. If you want this bill to go into QuickBooks, you do need the vendor invoice number. Now, we won't be demonstrating it going into QuickBooks today, but it is important that you understand that for it to go in, it needs this reference number. The other thing that's very important for printouts is the quoted for PO. When you're trying to create a printout and you want to give something to the vendor or you want to put something on file, you'll see a lot of the times it comes out as zero. The zero isn't because the bill to job is zero, it's because the quoted for PO amount hasn't been filled in. The quoted for PO amount is the actual printout amount. It could be the same as the billable amount, or it could be another amount. That is entirely what you would like to have show up on the printout. So in this case, I'm just going to put in $120 for the PO amount. I'm not going to fill in any of the job amounts quite yet. What I am going to fill in, though, is this cost of goods sold. And I'm just going to leave it blank for the time being until we actually create the invoice here. So I just hit save. And now I'm going to go ahead and print. Now you'll see here the subtotal and the total are zero. That's just because at current we haven't put in what we're actually being charged from the vendor and what we're actually charging the client. So I'm just going to actually print the purchase order first so you can see what the purchase order looks like now that we've got the $120 filled in. And there we go. So there it is. Currently there's the $120 quoted for and my terms on the purchase order. So what we're going to do now is pretend that we just created the purchase order. We are now going back in to actually make this a physical bill or a vendor invoice. And by doing that, we fill in the rest of the right-hand side information. And we'll just call this one image source, and let's say number 345. And it would help if I could spell again. Here we are. All right, so there we are. And I'll just put a capital on both of these. Right. There we go. So now we're going to put the quantity in. The rate is going to be 120 because that's what the vendor's asking from us. We're not doing any discounts because the vendor hasn't been gracious enough to give us any discounts on this purchase from them. We will fill in no tip. Now, just keep in mind, a tip is anything you do not want tax calculated on. So, for example, let's say you wanted to do some sort of fee on top without being charged taxed on it. That would be where you put it in. It would be in the tip field. The tip field does not flow through to the job financials page. That is specifically for the vendor. So on this blue section here, you'll notice there's two labels: supplier, vendor, invoice. Again, that's the information you're getting from the vendor to fill in for the invoice. And you've got the blue section, which is to build a job. That's what's actually going to be charged against the job to the client. So for example, here we'll see there's a 20% markup, which then gives a $144 build a job amount. You can put an override amount in if you like, and that can just be a flat amount that you want to override to the job. Or you can actually go in and change the markup value to say 30% here. And if you just click out of the field, you'll notice that the markup value changes and the build a job changes. So we're just going to go hit save here. And now we've got a completed vendor invoice and build a job amount of $156. Before I head into the other type of expenses, I'm just going to reach out again back to Emma and see if anything's come up or any questions or concerns at this moment.
Hey, Jeremy, thanks for checking in. Perhaps while we were on that edit view, you could just speak really briefly about that tick box called Build a Job. I know that's one that I've gotten hung up on before, and let me see if I understand it correctly before I force you to answer. Am I accurate in thinking that I would use that if perhaps I've already invoiced my client for this expense that I'm putting in?
This would actually stop it from going on the potential invoice.
Okay, so if we click
It's
that box.
correct. It's a flag for the system to think that it's already been billed.
Okay, great. There may be occasions for some of our clients to use that, and I know that when I'm talking to clients, they often say, "Hey, what's that build box mean, and what does that do?" So just wanted to make sure we covered that.
Great. No, that's a great question. I've had it a few times as well. All right, so let's just go ahead and save this. And let's take a look. I want to show you the job for the next one. The next one is going to be my on-site consulting. Now, it may not be a consulting that you'll be doing for your client, but let's say you've got a client, let's say is in Chicago, and you are based out of Florida, and they want you to do a presentation of the mock-ups that you've currently got on the go, or anything that they would like to see face-to-face, or maybe it was a preliminary discussion about the work that you're going to be doing for the client, and they wanted to have a one-on-one and meet you and understand, where your company's coming from and what other portfolio you've got for the designs you've done for other organizations. So I've created this expense. And for the actual estimate, you can see it's just on-site and training. And it's 3 hours, or in this case, because it's actually days that we're billing out, it's 3 days at a total of $1,200 a day, which would be then $3,600 for that estimated value. If you actually want to see the descriptions and how I filled in the estimate, let's just take a quick peek at this tab right here. Go to the estimate. You can see 3-day on-site consulting and training, including travel time to and from Chicago. And the expenses will include flight, local transportation, meals, and hotel to a combined total of $1,200, and then any extras on top of that. And now you can see on this estimate, I don't have expenses. I did not estimate expenses at this point. So if we go back to the job details, you'll notice what I was talking about earlier and mentioned. When you're at the job financials page, you can't click add expense. You can add time against it because there is an internal service with hours, but you cannot actually put an expense against it. So for this one, we actually have to go to expenses, external, and add expense, and fill in everything. And in this case, for example, the supplier is going to be James Smith. And James is an employee here. And James wants to get basically reimbursed for his flight costs, his meal costs, and his hotel costs. So we're going to go ahead and put James Smith as the actual supplier in this case. The job is going to be our on-site job, so you can just type in on S and then hit tab, and of course it will pull up the job right away because there's only one that's got on-site on it. And again, if you had more similar search strings there, it will pull those up into a pop-up list where you can pick from the available jobs. The service group, I'm just going to actually do a search using the magnifying glass, And again, with the magnifying glass, if you click on the magnifying glass, it's going to show you everything. And it's going to show you the last 200 service groups. And so, for example, here, if you want something specific, it's better to type it in and hit Tab rather than click on the magnifying glass. In this case, I've only got on-site on the estimate, so you won't have to see all the different services, and I've cleaned up my system, so the last 200 don't really exist, but in your current version of your system, you will see more service groups available. Now, with the expense types, it will bring up all the expense types available from your admin section of Function Point. And I have kind of simplified mine. As you can see, I've got copywriting and creative. But you can also see here that I've got hotel. So for example, hotel will be there for, again, James getting reimbursed for his hotel. You could either do quantity, say for like a 3-night stay of quantity, and say it was $159 a night, then it's $477. That's how much James cost the organization to go. And basically that's how much he wants to get recouped, and then you can decide how much you want to get reimbursed by the client. And so for example here, I'm actually going to charge a client a little bit more, and let's get 15% markup on it, either due to currency fluctuation or currency conversion, or let's say you want to make a little profit on sending James out there to your client's site. So we're just going to go ahead and hit save on this one. And again, I just want to point this out. If you try to print the purchase order right now, it's going to be blank because we did not fill in that PO amount. And there it is. It's $0. So what I'm going to do is just edit this expense one more time. And I'm going to add another line in here. And again, it's this add line is in the top right corner. You can add as many lines as you want to a multi-line expense form. However, it does have to be against the same supplier. And so I'm just going to type in on-site here again. And here I'm going to pick meals and entertainment. And so what I do is break it down, quantity 1. So let's say I spent $30. And in the description, I'm going to put in what I spent the $30 on. Food at, let's use Red Lobster. And then here, hotel, spent 3 days at Hard Rock Hotel. And it is an inside thing here that I really do like the Hard Rock Hotel and the Hard Rock Cafe, so that's one of the reasons I'm using it as an example. So we've gone ahead and put that in. So now when we actually go out and hit the Save button here, when we go to Print, and we print the external expense list, this is what we call an expense form, and this is what you would produce and give back to the controller of the company to put through your expenses. And you'll see that it was for hotel and meals to a total of $583.05. So that's what the employee would be reimbursed with, $583.05. And we've got another printout as well. If we come into here, we've got the request for quote, which is you're actually requesting a estimate from the vendor for the work. We've got the purchase order, which is actually the PO printout, and again the expense form list. And you'll notice here at the top you've also got the expense description. So you can put an overall description of what the expense is for. Again, you've got the expense date, so you know exactly when the expense was put in. And let's say, for example, let's say you are the accountant or the controller in the company, and you wanted to find certain expenses and a date range because you're doing the accounting at this point and you're cutting the checks for the employees. You would click on Find, and then you can come in and either put in the PO number or the reference number if you knew it, or the supplier. But what I find kind of cool is actually putting in the creation date. So you can actually do, for example, let's say March 1st, ... space March, let's say 6, tab, it picks up the date. And now you can actually search any expenses created in that date range. And there you can see that I've created 3. Now these are individual expenses, but you can see that these 2 are actually part of the same PO. And what I wanted to show you here is you've got the option to export this to a CSV, and then you've also got an option to print this. And this is the same print list that we were looking at just a moment ago, but for all the expenses in that date range. And then combined sum total. Emma, I just want to know, is anybody there asking any questions, or they're all still pretty quiet?
No, thanks for checking in. We've had a couple of good questions actually, and I'm hoping you can answer them. I certainly don't want to throw you for a loop here. One of the questions we've had is asking, would it be a good practice to separate out charges by the vendor using that add line item, or is it better to just lump it all into one?
It really depends how you want the breakdown. If you use an accounting package, either simply accounting or QuickBooks, which we have a integration with, and you want it to be broken down when it gets into those packages, it would be best to do individual line items. If you just want to actually cut a check for, let's say, a sum total of an event of some sort, and you don't want the details broken down, then you would just do the one line item for the total sum and just add a description, just letting you know what that total sum was and indicate that there.
Great, thank you. I hope that answers, and Suzanne, let us know if that doesn't answer the question. Another one we had from Suzanne that I also thought you might be able to answer. When you were putting those expenses through for James, you were putting them through, they were external expenses. And Suzanne had asked, well, hey, why wouldn't these be internal? And I can see where she's coming from. James works for your mock company here. Might you be able to answer that?
Yes. Um, Kind of the rule of thumb, if you want to say that, internal expenses would be any internal work that you're doing in-house that you could have gone to a vendor for, i.e., let's say you're making a print, so let's say you're doing a brochure or a logo or banner, and you would, let's say, in this case, you would have gone to Image Source, but you went out and bought a fancy LaserJet printer or plotter, and then you paid James to actually do it himself. That would be an internal expense. Since James is actually going on site to a client and he's actually working with the client, and then you're going to be billing the customer for it, that is more of a, I want to call it freelance or a vendor expense, which is an outsourced at that point expense.
Excellent. Thank you. And again, Suzanne, just let us know if that doesn't fully address your question. And then one last one that just came in asking about the expenses. You haven't tracked those. The question was, have they been tracked to an internal service? And I believe you tracked them to an external service or service group, yes?
Correct, yes. With Function Point, the workflow process is put in place where you can track time against internal services, but you can't necessarily track external expenses against internal services. Now, you can create an internal service on the estimate and then put in an external expense against that internal service. As far as the accounting principle goes, you've got the left side and the right side of the transaction, but as far as function point goes, there's no way to offset the expense against the internal services. They're two different types. So that's why I always recommend saying, put in the expense as an estimated expense and then create the expense against the expense type. And I'll go back into this question here and kind of go in a little bit more specific details. You'll notice that the expense type, they can't be internal services. So when you're looking at your reports, you could put in an internal service called hotel for $548.55, create an expense with the expense type hotel, and then put the expense in for $548.55, and technically that would zero out as far as the financials are concerned. But as far as function points concerned, they are two separate entities.
Excellent. And I just had another, and Lisa oh no, that is Suzanne, let us, Bob, gosh, I'm going to say everyone's name who's on here today. Let us know if that doesn't sufficiently answer the question. We did have another one from Lisa. And again, I hope I'm not throwing you for a loop here. Lisa's question is, when we export expenses that have a quantity and a unit price to QuickBooks, it's not coming across as she's expecting. So she's saying, for example, quantity of 3 at $159. It's showing in QuickBooks as a total expense of 159, not 477. Is that normal? Now that may be something we'll need to take offline unless you have an immediate answer to that.
It should be something we take offline because it's something I'll have to call and actually take a look at. It should be coming in with the unit amount and the rate, and then the total of 477.
Okay. Well, I will make sure that someone reaches out to Lisa then directly once we finish up today. So thank you for your question, Lisa. We will follow up with you on that.
Was there
Excellent.
anything? Any
Um,
other questions?
Oh, we don't have any yet. I mean, I think people will start sending them in as we go here.
Sure.
That was very very helpful though, Jeremy. I find you always do such a nice job of explaining these things, and you always sound very very good when you explain these things. So well done. Uh, for sure. Now, would it be something that I've had clients ask me about lately on these expense forms because they did change lately? I'm a big fan of the new look of them myself. Would it be fair to say with the new look that that sort of gold line, I mean, I know it's labeled there, the gold line is everything that you would be getting from your vendor perhaps on their invoice to you, and everything on the blue line is more about your end of things? Is that how we could sort of divide the document up there?
That is correct. So basically, kind of a a thing I've been watching is the Once Upon a Time. So I was going to use the metaphor as the gold is you giving away the money, and the blue is being sad that you haven't made money back yet.
That's a very. I watched Once Upon a Time. I'm only in season one though. And they film it here. That I think makes a lot of sense. We did get a question in while we were chatting there. Catherine is asking, does the printout of the expenses break down the GST amount? That's a good one, and I'm not actually sure.
Let me add the tax group onto here. Let me make sure that I've actually got it set up and throw some tax on here. And
Perfect.
the short answer is it should. If it currently isn't, then it's something we'd have to take a look at.
Okay.
But let's do the purchase order as well as the expense form.
Okay.
And it would help if I had the printed for PO amount turned in as well. So let's take a look at the expense list here
Okay,
and
great.
see if that's got the tax. So it is not bringing the tax in on the external expense list, so I can definitely talk to our product team about that.
Okay. That's
Um,
would that I mean, Catherine may want to tell us more about why that would be important, or you might know, Jeremy, why that would be an important thing to be able to see on a printout.
um, uh, the logic I can see behind it is the fact that the GST here is going towards the vendor.
Ah, okay.
So they would want to see that, yes, we are paying tax towards them, and we would want to know how much tax that was we're also paying the vendor.
Okay. Well,
Now, I am taking a look here, and kind of you'll notice that there is no tax group for the bill the job amount. That is actually because you'll be billing the client the taxes once the taxes come on from the physical customer-facing invoice. So this tax group here is specifically for what the vendor's asking you to pay as far as taxes.
okay. Well, we can look into, like you said, maybe there is a printout option out there that does show it. So thank you for asking that, Catherine. Well, we're just at half past the hour. What maybe would be a good idea to do is just to chat a little bit more about where people can get further information, and then sort of leave it open for people to ask questions, but us stop talking. What I might do, Jeremy, is just make myself presenter again so I can just show a couple of screens, unless there's anything else you think would be good to show while we've got everyone on the line here.
Yeah, there was one last thing I did want to mention and include in the webinar.
Please.
Um, you know, in the last 3 years that I've been here, there's been so many people wondering about credit card expenses and can we handle credit card expenses? There isn't a solid answer for that. There are a couple workarounds that we can perform for credit card expenses. And I did want to briefly touch on that just so that we can cover it. There's kind of a two-way street when it comes to credit card expenses. You can come in here, for example, and I'm just using Staples as an example. You can put the supplier into Staples. You could put it on any job you want, and in case this one, I will actually pull up the job list here, and I believe it's 30313, supplies expenses for the job. So I just wanted to go in here and pick expenses, and then what type of expense it was, and let's say it was signage. So let's say you had to run down to Staples and pick up some signage. You'll notice that there's no like, I used a credit card for it. You can put a credit card name in the description. So again, when you're creating the check out to this employee, or you're just tracking the expense log, you'll know that the signage was paid with a Visa against the Staples organization. The other option for the workflow process is you can come in and actually create Visa as the supplier, and then again, same thing, put it in, and then in the description you can say bought at Staples if you want to keep track of that. Those are the two kind of workarounds there are for what QuickBooks or simply would call credit card charges. Now, keep in mind when you use like a QuickBooks or Simply, they allow you to do an import from your online bank account in, and it reconciles against your credit card. When you use the supplier as the actual credit card company, it does not add it to the credit card, I want to call it the credit card charge section, where it automatically then sees Visa and says, okay, these are the charges against Visa. Do you want to reconcile against it? It creates a vendor in your vendor list called Visa and shows the bill on that. You would have to do a fancy little journal entry or move the transaction into the proper bucket for it to actually be called a true credit card charge.
Excellent. Thanks for that, Jeremy. I'm glad we've got that recorded. Um, Something that just came in, if you wouldn't mind, just showing us back in admin where it is you can say, hey, this expense shouldn't be taxable, where you can decide. And I think it's just in those expense, like in the list view, that you can see that. I just wanted to point that section out for a question that came in, if you wouldn't mind.
Yes, it's actually going to be under admin, and it's going to be managed services and expenses, and we're actually going to click on external expenses in this case. And then, for example, we'll click on copywriting, and there'll be a checkbox for each tax group that's applicable. So you'll see GST is applicable on this copywriting service, but HST isn't, and then PST as well on copywriting. You may say, well, none of it's taxable, so we'll hit submit. And then the next time you use copywriting, you'll see that the tax is now empty, so no taxes will be charged on that service.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Jeremy. And just a little tidbit that came in from Keith. Now, admittedly, what Keith is saying is going a little over my blonde head. Jeremy, will probably make sense to you, but this may be interesting feedback for everyone on the call today. Keith is saying that he uses the supplier. It goes to AP, and then he pays it with the proper credit card. A little bit clumsy, but it works and keeps the charge to the vendor. Does that make sense to you? I'm assuming it does.
It does, yeah. That's basically the easiest way to write it off once it's in QuickBooks, and it also keeps the audit trail as well, as when you go to look at your Visa statement or your credit card statement, you can see that it was all paid off with the Visa.
Nice. So Keith seems to have figured out a good way to make that happen for him, which is thanks for sending that in, Keith, and letting me share that with everyone on the call today. All right. Well, we're at 12:35. I certainly don't want to rush anyone away. Is there anything else, Jeremy, you think would be worth sharing with everyone while we've got them sort of captive here, captive audience?
Um, no, I just hope everyone's having a good martini lunch.
Yeah, we haven't talked yet quite about martinis, have we? Let's see. I've just got one more question in here. Now people are asking questions like crazy, of course. It's when we threaten to stop answering them that they come in. Great question, Suzanne. Suzanne, your timing is impeccable. She has asked, we don't have QuickBooks integration. We'd like to make that move. She's wondering if it integrates with QuickBooks Online. Jeremy, should I let you announce or make that statement there?
It currently is in production. There is a rough ETA of about a month. If everything goes right, it's going to be a month, and it will. If the development slows down, then it's be about 2 months away. But it is in the process. We've had enormous amounts of people asking about the QuickBooks Online, and we've had a dedicated developer just going to town trying to get it done. And they are in the beta testing stage, and we will be getting a look at it in about a week's time, and then we can give you more feedback and update on that. But yes, it will be happening.
Very exciting news. Yeah, I'm pretty keen to see that coming. And like you said, it should be, we're testing now. So Oh, and we're getting positive reactions from the crowd here through the question area, so that's really good news. Of course, we'll keep everyone posted on that, and we will not release it till it's really, really ready to go. So, great news there. Excellent. All right. Well, I'm going to steal away presenter rights from you, Jeremy.
Yes, we wouldn't
Just
want to have me lock everyone out and.
oh gosh. Well, as long as we don't hang up on everyone like we've done. Okay, I'm making myself presenter, and hopefully I'm showing the correct screen, just the agenda there again. So questions, feel free to keep asking them just in the GoToWebinar control panel there, and then Jeremy and I will address them in writing. And if you are looking for further help after the session, when you're logged into your FP system, you should see help up in the top menu. Hover over there, you'll see both training, our community forum, and a way to contact support there. And next session, so same time next week, it's going to be Omar and I going through KPIs, your dashboard KPIs, which I'm a huge fan of. Some of them I understand a little better than others. I think Omar's pretty well informed on them, though. So that should be a good session. That's going to be the last one of this AHA series. And I know that we're going to be having some team brainstorming sessions to figure what future sessions should be all about. So if anyone who's attending today thinks, oh, this expenses one was great, but I'd like to see a session about this or that or the other thing, just feel free to drop me a line. Let me know what your preferred subject matter would be for future sessions, and we'll get that into our internal brainstorming session. Jeremy, anything you wanted to add or recommend or suggest for our listeners today?
No, I think we've kind of gone through it and hit the nail in the coffin for most of it, and kind of.
So it's just the bottom line is that if anyone lives near a Hard Rock hotel, they should, if they want to get on your good side, just pick up a T-shirt and a double XL for you, or maybe a hat, and they'll get support forever.
That's all. They'll get support forever, but that would be better support. I'm just kidding.
Fair enough.
No
No.
matter what, it'll be supported.
I used to try to bribe Jeremy anyway with peanut butter O. Henry bars, but then he told me I had to stop because none of his pants were fitting. So, yeah, he's probably better off being bribed with clothes, but he really doesn't need to be bribed at all. I tease, I tease. Jeremy, really, really thanks for doing that. I know you've got a lot on your plate, so thanks for taking the time out to do that presentation. That made sense even to me, so that's fantastic. And if anyone, you do have follow-up questions or concerns, you can't find what you're needing in our help or community forum, do reach out to us, reach out to support or reach out to me. A member of the team will always respond as quickly as we can and get you the assistance you need. Excellent. Well, what I'll do is I will stop talking, stop recording. We'll leave the session open for another good 10 minutes, so feel free to type your questions in, and hope to see everyone again next week. So thanks again, Jeremy, and thanks to everyone for showing up today.
Thank you.